The Sukhoi Su-30MKK is a fourth-generation Russian fighter, primarily operated by China. In real life, and as a premium in War Thunder, it stands out as a highly capable plane. In this video, we'll take a look into what NATO calls the Flanker G, going into its history, its performance in War Thunder, how to play it, and whether it's worth buying. The Su-30 began life not as the multi-role fighter that it is today, but rather as a development of the Su-27, targeted towards making a long-range interceptor and airborne command post for the PVO. This began in 1986 as the Su-27PU, or T-10U, which later became the Su-30. This was based off the twin-seat trainer Su-27UB and included new equipment including a large display in the rear cockpit and the ability to refuel in flight. The first prototype flew on the 30th of December 1989, and production followed in April 1992 under the flag of the new Russian Federation instead of the now dead Soviet Union. All in all, only 5 Su-30s entered service with the VVS between 1994 and 1996. In the following years, 2 factories, one in Irkutsk and one in Komsomolsk, developed 2 families of 2-seat multi-role fighters, both calling theirs the Su-30. Irkutsk developed an upgraded export version for India, incorporating canards, thrust vectoring, and a pacer radar to make the Su-30MKI. Komsomolsk, on the other hand, eventually went on to develop the Su-30MKK. Compared to the MKI, the MKK is less sophisticated, equipped with an older, but lighter radar, allowing it to carry increased payload. In the late 1990s, with the aftermath of the First Gulf War, the PLAAF was becoming increasingly concerned about the capabilities of the US military, particularly how easily they were able to penetrate our heavily defended airspace. As a result, the PLAAF began to switch to a more aggressive approach, and this necessitated the adoption of offensive strike capabilities. Since their bomber fleet was both small and archaic, this required a new plane, a heavy multi-role fighter with a large combat radius and the ability to precision strike. As mentioned in my J11 family video, which you can watch in the top right, this was a driving factor to develop an indigenous variant of their flankers to cover this missing gap. While designs and mock-ups for such a flanker originated in at least 2001, both the J11A and J11B fell short in this respect, and all Shenyang-built flankers remained in service as fighters with a merely rudimentary ground attack capability, with just unguided rockets and bombs. A new aircraft had already been under development for a similar purpose, however, the JH-7. While not quite a capable fighter, it definitely looked to fill the precision strike capability. Unfortunately for the JH-7, its development was marred with issues and delays, and eventually the PLAAF's frustration led to them pursuing another option and pulling out of the program. If you're interested in the JH-7, I've got a video on it in the top right. The road to the Su-30MKK began with rounds of negotiations between representatives in 1996 to 1997. During a visit to Russia in 1996, Chinese Premier Li Peng signed a $1.8 billion deal to purchase 38 advanced multi-role combat aircraft, and technical negotiations started immediately. From the beginning, Sukhoi tailored its offer around the Su-30MK, a modification of the original Su-30 that incorporated technology from the Su-27M to provide expanded combat capabilities. The leadership of Sukhoi decided to start production in the Komsomolsk plant, and in 1998 the Su-30MKK was officially designated, MKK meaning Modernized Commercial China, which led to the unofficial nickname of Makaka, meaning macaque, which is a small monkey. Design work on the Su-30MKK began in earnest at Sukhoi in 1998, with the contract officially being signed in August 1999. Before this could take place, however, significant technical work had to be done. The PLAAF wanted the Su-30MKK on a tight schedule, and so efforts were made to expedite the process and reuse as much previously developed parts and technology as possible. The construction of the first prototype, number 501, was described as like building a Lego toy, with the front fuselage being borrowed from an Su-30, the center from an Su-27M, and the rear from an Su-27SK, and the undercarriage from an Su-30MKI. In fact, only the forward fuselage was fundamentally new for NAPO in terms of production. Since the rear was taken from a different design, the extra fuel tanks of the Su-27M, later to be the Su-35, were not included, which led to a simplified and lighter structure. Much like the Su-30MKK's structure, the equipment and systems were also hybrids. The core of the design was a modified N001VE radar with a new IRST that allowed ground targets to be marked with a laser. Other systems included a new HMS, satellite navigation, and other new computers. The layout of the cockpit was completely upgraded, with analog instruments being replaced with 2-color LCD screens with push-button surrounds. The weapon loadouts were also expanded, with the ability to carry the RVV-AE, Export R77, KH-29, KH-31, and KH-59 series of missiles, as well as guided bombs, all of which were firsts for the PLAAF. Assembly of the first prototype was finished in March 1999, and it flew 2 months later, with the second prototype following shortly. The next 2 prototypes were then built to serial production standard following the signing of the contract, and testing was finished by the end of 2000. On the 20th of December that year, the first 10 Su-30MKKs were officially handed over to the PLAAF and delivered to China, where they were flown to their new home base at Wuhu. The second batch of 10 was delivered in August 2001, and the last 18 were delivered by the end of that year. The PLAAF was more than satisfied with what was now the most capable aircraft in their air fleet, and in 2001, a second contract for another 38 was signed, with the new aircraft arriving between 2003 and 2004. At the same time the Su-30MKK was entering service with the PLAAF, rumors began circulating that China was interested in signing a third contract for another batch of these aircraft, this time a supposedly navalized version. However, a growing rift between Beijing and Moscow regarding contractual issues regarding licensed production was forming, and instead of a heavily modernized version, dubbed the Su-30MK3, the Su-30MK2 was instead chosen in a limited batch of only 24 aircraft. This had a relatively small number of differences, being mostly focused around the maritime strike role. This included an upgraded N001 VEP radar, up from the N001 VE of the MKK. Other changes included the ability to mount the KH-31A and a new heads-up display. Following the delivery of these aircraft, rumors persisted that China wanted to upgrade the radar on their Su-30s, something not really possible as the Zuk radar required more power than their MKKs could handle. These rumors fizzled out around 2007 with the first prototype of the J-16, which had a Chinese ASA radar and was essentially an upgrade over the Su-30s in just about every way. In PLAAF service, all of the Su-30MKKs wore the same two-tone grey colour scheme, with one notable exception. While assigned to the 54th Air Regiment, known for being one of the PLAAF's aggressor squadrons, these were painted in desert and tropical camouflage instead. The first batch of Su-30MKKs was assigned to the FTTC, their Flight Test and Training Center, as well as the 3rd Air Division. The rest were assigned to convert 2 former J7 units. The PLANAF's Su-30MK2s, on the other hand, received a very light grey colour scheme, with white radomes, and still served with the 4th Naval Air Brigade. Both the MKK and MK2 were upgraded sometime around 2015 to be compatible with Chinese AAMs, being seen carrying PL-8Bs and PL-12s. Both aircraft remained among the most capable aircraft in the PLA's service until recently, with increased J-16 production starting to push them closer to the end of their service lives. Both Su-30 variants have served alongside a number of derivatives of the flanker, from Russian-built Su-27SKs to Chinese-built J-11s, to the carrier-capable J-15s, and now to the highly advanced J-16s. China wasn't the only nation to operate these flankers, with the Su-30MK2 being operated by a number of different air forces around the world. Indonesia has 11, Uganda 6, and Vietnam 35, whilst Venezuela operates 21 as the renamed Su-30MKV, and Russia flies 19 as the Su-30M2. Having just been added in the December Line of Contact update, the Su-30MKK is a Rank 8 Chinese pack premium. I'll give an overview here before going on to how to play it in air, ground, and whether or not I think it's worth buying. For starters, if you're familiar with a Venezuelan Su-30MKV premium in the Soviet tree, the MKK will be very familiar to you. This is because the MKV is a renamed MK2, which in War Thunder terms makes it almost identical, aside from a couple missiles which we'll get to in a moment. For the airframe, it flies like a heavier version of the Su-27 and J-11. For those unfamiliar with how flankers fly in general, they're fairly heavy but can still pull alright, with their standout feature being the ability to disable their AOA limiter and at speeds of around 600 km an hour, instantly dump all of their speed for some crazy angles. Although, in practice, this is a gimmick and you won't use it unless you're in a dogfight and need it at last resort. For the Su-30MKK specifically, I'd recommend being cautious of climbing too high, especially above 6 km. Whilst the plane can take you much higher, the thinner air means you're much more sluggish in a turn, which can spell death when trying to notch. The Su-30MKK features a Mech N001VE radar, which is an exact stat clone of the N001VEP found on several other flankers. It's fairly underwhelming for a high-tier fighter, but it just about gets the job done. You may find you struggle with TWS, which will hamper your ability to BVR duel at the opening of combat. It also features a helmet-mounted sight, which you can slave your radar and IR missiles to. It has 2 data link channels, allowing you to guide ARH missiles onto 2 targets at once. You have the L150-14 radar warning receiver, which is a capable digital RWR that features target ID and covers the C to J band. Although, do be careful as it, much like most RWRs, lacks coverage directly above and below the aircraft. You can make up for this by occasionally rolling. Your engines aren't crazy fuel hungry, and you have ample fuel tanks. Bringing a full tank of fuel at the start of the match will be more than enough to last the majority of situations, which is good as you don't get any drop tanks. Your inbuilt cannon is the Gush 30-1, which is a single-barreled 30mm cannon that provides decent damage and good ballistics. Although the flanker's floaty flight model in dogfights can often make it impractical to aim. As for your suspended armament, the Su-30MKK has a vast array of options which we'll go over, starting with air-to-air before moving on to CAS. With regards to air-to-air weapons, the Su-30MKK is unique among flankers as it can carry both Russian and Chinese missiles. This allows you a vast array of options to pick and choose the specific loadout that suits your playstyle best, although I'll offer some suggestions of my own in the Air RB section. First up are your active radar homing Fox 3s. You have 2 to choose from, the Russian RVV-AE, which is an exported R77, and the Chinese PL-12. Both are decently capable ARHs, with the 2 of them being among the more maneuverable side of missiles. The R77 is the second best pulling ARH in the game, after the Mica, whilst the PL-12 is faster and has a better range, while not being able to pull quite as hard. Secondly, you have your infrared guided Fox 2s. You have a choice of 3, although one is very much not like the others. Your main ones are the Russian R73E, an export R73, and the Chinese PL-8B, which is an improved derivative of the Israeli Python 3. These are both fairly good IR missiles, and both feature gate-width IRCCM. The PL-8B is somewhat faster and has a longer range, whilst the R73 has thrust vectoring, which allows it to pull some frankly insane shots, if it doesn't occasionally spin itself out. These both go on the outer 2 pylons on each wing, with nothing else fitting there. you also have access to the R27ET, which is an IR version of the R27ER, although you can only bring 2 and they use the same pylons as the Fox 1s and 3s. The aforementioned R27ER is your final type of missile, a semi-active radar homing Fox 1. This means that, unlike the other 2 which are fire and forget, you have to lock the target with your radar to guide it in. The main advantage that the R27ER has over the other missiles is its kinematic performance. It's significantly faster and longer range than either of the Fox 3s. Aside from air-to-air missiles, the Su-30MKK also features a wide array of air-to-ground munitions, including the best ATGM loadout in the entire Chinese tree. I'll once again go over all the types here, before talking about how to best employ them in the ground RB section. First up are what will likely be your CAS mainstay, the KH-29s. These come in 2 variants, the laser-guided KH-29L and the much more useful TV-guided KH-29TD. The L has a range of 10 km and must be manually guided by a laser lock. Because the MKK lacks a targeting pod, you'll have to use the rather subpar inbuilt system, which has limited angles. The KH-29TD, on the other hand, is probably the flagship CAS for the plane. With a range of 35 km and a TV seeker, they are fire and forget, although they can sometimes struggle with getting a good lock, especially in situations with poor lighting and especially at night. Both KH-29s support a large warhead that will kill practically anything they hit. The KH-29TD can, if you're feeling freaky, even be used to target aircraft, although it's fairly hard to do to planes at the BR the Su-30MKK finds itself at, but helicopters are great targets for this. Next up are your other air-to-surface missile, the KH-59ME. This, originally being an anti-ship missile, isn't all that practical in War Thunder. It has TV guidance, with inertial backup and a whopping 120 km maximum range. This sounds great, until you realize that that's against ships, not going to lock any tanks from far out. It's also a slower missile than the KH-29s, and with a fairly similar sized warhead, so you're usually better off taking those instead, especially as the KH-59 requires you to waste a pylon bringing a designator pod just for them. Moving on to guided bombs, the MKK has access to 2, the CAB 500KRM and the CAB 1500KR. These are 500 and 1500 kilos respectively, although the guided 500 has the same explosive mass as an unguided Fab 250, whilst the guided 1500 has more than an unguided Fab 1500. Much like the earlier missiles, these are TV guided, which makes them fire and forget. Because they don't have boosters or wings, they'll still require the same drops as unguided bombs, so they're risky to use in the presence of anti-air. Now onto unguided weapons. The Su-30MKK has a full set of CCIP, so you at least have some guidance, although I'd rarely recommend using these, especially as you don't need to stock grind. The first of these are your dumb rockets. You have 3 options to choose from. 4 S-25Os, which are very large HE rockets, 20 S-13OFs, which are decently large HE rockets, and the smaller S-8KOs, which are smaller heat rockets that you can carry 80 of. As for dumb bombs, you can carry 100, 250, 500, and 1500 HE types, as well as 500 kilo incendiary ones. In Air RB, the Su-30MKK sits at 13.3, being the same BR as the Su-30MKV and the J-11A, 2 aircraft with similar playstyles. Whilst this guide is about the MKK, most of this information will also apply to the MKV, and to a lesser extent the J-11A, minus the PL-8Bs and PL-12s. The MKK finds itself in a unique position in Air RB, being the only aircraft currently able to carry both Russian and Chinese AAMs. This allows you greater flexibility when building your loadouts, and you can really get into your personal preferences as you see fit. We'll go over how to best use the various missiles you get, before moving on to suggest some loadouts that might work for you. First, you have the PL-12. This is the faster of your two ARH missiles with a longer range but less pull. This means that it's often best used at the opening of the match in those fast, high-altitude BVR duels where you want something that you can crank before being able to pull into the notch as soon as possible. For those of you who aren't aware, cranking is when you have a radar missile being guided at the edge of your radar gimbal limit, allowing you to keep your distance from the enemy, who may be launching one back, and more easily pull into a notch. Notching is when you have an enemy radar missile perpendicular to you and you drop chaff, getting the missile to mistake you for ground clutter. You'll have to move around, either up or down works best, while staying perpendicular, or most missiles will still hit you because of the IOG remembering where it last saw you going. Next, you have the RVV-AE or the R77. This is the counterpart to the PL-12, being able to pull harder but having a shorter range and a slower speed, although still perfectly serviceable. Due to these characteristics, it's more optimized for the mid and late game, where the better pull can help you hit off-bore sight shots, allowing you to keep flying defensively. Moving on from ARH missiles, we have the only SARH missile, the R27ER. This is kind of a unicorn missile, with very good kinematics that outperform the ARH missiles in most areas, at the important cost of needing to guide it with your own radar. Fortunately, it has good IOG, allowing you to deliberately break the lock, watch it continue on your radar screen, and then just turn your radar back on once the ER is too close to dodge. After the R27ER, there's the R27ET. This uses the same frame as the ER, but instead of a radar seeker, it has an infrared seeker. This means that it doesn't alert any RWRs, although it could still trigger MORS should your opponent have that. While it's a very useful missile on earlier jets, such as the Su-27 and J-11, its niche of being able to chase down fleeing opponents is better filled by other missiles in most cases, such as your ARHs. While it's certainly not impossible to make work, you'd be better served bringing something else. Even its IRCCM capability is outmatched by your IR missiles. The first of these IR missiles is the PL-8B. As the outer two pylons can only mount your small IR missiles, not the 27ET, the PL-8B can and should be compared to the R-73. The PL-8B is the faster of the two and has a slightly longer range, but as a result it pulls much less, lacking any thrust vectoring mischief. These will be best suited to tail chasers, particularly against multipathing aircraft. They do have IRCCM, but as its gate width, it's not perfect and often bites flares unless it's already up the enemy's tailpipe. Speaking of thrust vectoring mischief, next up is the R-73E. This missile is capable of pulling some rather silly maneuvers, with a slight risk of getting performance anxiety and spinning itself out. This is generally best used for dogfights, snapshots, or just hitting people in general. With those weapons explained, I'll now go through loadouts. While there may be a temptation to bring a mix of all or most of your missiles to cover all your niches, this can actually be a bit of a trap, as you'll often find yourself spending too much time cycling between weapon groups to be able to appropriately respond to situations. I'd recommend keeping to a maximum of 3, up to 4 if you're confident. Across all of these loadouts, I'd recommend taking R-73s over the PL-8Bs, as the situational uses of the PL-8Bs rarely outweigh having to swap between another weapon group. If you're coming from other planes with ARH missiles and you're not confident with R-27ERs, I'd recommend this loadout of 4 RVV-AEs and 2 PL-12s. Your PL-12s can fill the role that the ERs fill to a degree, and will be the most useful early match if you want to joust with them. If you're familiar with the other flankers, such as the Su-30MKV, J-11A, or even Su-27SM, or you don't want to be VR, you might want to try running a loadout of either 4 RVV-AEs and 2 R-27ERs, or 5 and 1 of them. This lack of PL-12s will cut out some of your ability to participate in the opening jousts, but you'll have more missiles for the mid and late match fights. If you've played one of those other flankers, especially the Su-30MKV, This playstyle will be identical to the one you're used to. My personal loadout of choice is a slightly more complex 2 PL-12s, 3 RVV-AEs, and a single R27ER. This does come with the drawback of having a fourth weapon group to cycle between, however it gives you plenty of versatility, and if you use your radar's 2 data link channels, you can get the PL-12s off your radar in the opening and be back down to those 3 groups to cycle between. With most loadouts, you'll find benefit in climbing to an average altitude to have plenty of energy. Since you're heavier than the other flankers, you don't want to climb too high as the thinner air can cost you all of your speed if you try to turn while up in space. While you do get the KH-29TDs, later versions of the KH-29Ts that I spoke about in the GH7 video, I wouldn't recommend trying to be devious and using them in the air-to-air role, as they do weigh you down quite a lot, and aircraft at this BR are usually fast enough for them to be a non-factor. As for base bombing, I wouldn't really recommend it in AirRB. You can't bring napalm unless you give up missile pylons, and even the KH-59MEs need you to sacrifice one for a guidance pod. While the Su-30MKK has what looks to be, on paper at least, a formidable CAS arsenal, the reality of it is that you really only have one useful weapon for ground RB, the KH-29TDs. With the ability to carry 6, these are both the most capable ATGM in the Chinese tree, whilst also allowing the MKK to carry the most out of any plane in the tree, being tied with the B model Mavericks on the F-16A. This previously would have put the MKK as the best CAS aircraft in the Chinese tree, but for one drawback and a new weapon added to other platforms. The MKK lacks a targeting pod, forcing you to use the KH-29's inbuilt seekers to find and lock your targets. This makes the whole loop take quite a bit longer, and the lack of thermals afforded by such a pod can lead you to miss targets that you would have otherwise found. The new weapon added to the J-10A, JF-17, both JH-7As, and the new J-10C is the LS-6 IR-250, which are generally much more reliable than KH-29TDs, being IR guided. With that said, the Su-30MKK can still do CAS quite capably, and it fits into a decent lineup at 12.3, albeit one prone to up tiers. It's most useful on open maps where it's easiest to find your targets, and your move is to fly in fast and decently high, dump all 6 KH-29s, and then haul ass out of there. In an up tier, you can prove pretty vulnerable to the high tier SAMs, which can shut you down pretty reliably. Due to your pylon numbers, you can additionally carry 2 radar missiles and 4 IR missiles to allow you to defend yourself, or take out enemy aircraft, which the Su-30MKK is fairly good at. Much like the AirRB section, this too applies to the Su-30MKV, which has the same CAS available to it. Like any high-tier premium, whether the Su-30MKK is worth buying or not depends entirely on you. Coming in at $80 US, it's certainly not a cheap plane by any stretch of the imagination, but if you have money to blow, or it's during a sale, it might be right for you. With Gaijin recently announcing their intent to add rank 9 to air trees early next year, if you want to reach those with a premium, then the old J7D won't cut it, leaving your 2 options being the Su-30MKK and the JH-7A prototype. Both cost the same too, which makes the comparison easier. For AirRB, the MKK blows the JH-7A out of the water. Whilst the JH-7A is in a much better spot than it used to be, the MKK at 13.3 is arguably busted. Flankers in general perform well in AirRB, especially full 16v16 lobbies, but the ability to carry Chinese AAMs whilst being at a lower BR than most ARH flankers really helps it along. In general, you'll find much more success grinding in the MKK, with a much higher potential for kills to speed the grind along. The SL and RP modifiers are also better, which is a nice touch. In ground RB, it's a little trickier. The recent addition of the LS6 IR 250s to the JH7A make it arguably a stronger cast platform, especially at its BR of 11.7, where it fits in a decent lineup with tanks such as the El Khalid and the VT5, and is by a good margin the best Chinese cast for that BR. The MKK, on the other hand, is at 12.3, where it does fit into a lineup but has strong competition in the form of the J10A with 4 LS6 IRs, and at a single BR step higher is the J10C, which can carry a whopping 10. With that said, the MKK is still capable with its 6 KH29 TDs, but even slight up tiers will be very punishing with their SPAA. While the Su-30MKK isn't fully unique, being very similar to the Venezuelan Su-30MKV premium in the Soviet tree, it's certainly more unique than the JH7A prototype, which is a direct copy of the tech tree JH7A. Overall, I'd recommend waiting until a sale to pick up any premium this expensive, but if you get the choice between the Su-30MKK and the JH7A prototype, I'd take the Su-30, unless you really like Chinese 11.7 ground RB. And that's it for the Su-30MKK as it currently stands in War Thunder. While we theoretically could see the Chinese Su-30MK2 in-game, I find it unlikely as it'd be essentially identical, especially when one exists in the Russian tree as the Venezuelan Su-30MKV. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, then liking and subscribing would really help me grow this channel. I've got a video on the MiG-25 coming up after the winter concert event brings it into the game, but if you'd like to vote on the topic of the next video, there'll be a poll in my Discord, link in the description. And that's all from me. As it's that time of year, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I'll see you in the New Year. I've been girltwink, fly safe.